Country Life on Midlands 103. Brought to you by W. Orshaw, Burlington Business Park, Tullamore. Supplier of New Holland tractors in the Midlands. worshaw.ie.
Now, good evening and welcome to Country Life here on Midlands 103. MJ Clery with you until 8 p.m. this evening on Wednesday, 1st of April 2026. As always, thank you all for joining me. We'll bring you the latest from the worlds of agriculture, food and agribusiness over the course of the next hour. In a moment, Joe Burke from Board Bia will chat to me about the current beef market with a view to shedding some light on the huge decrease in prices over the last number of weeks. Joe spoke in Abbeyleix on Monday night on a Irish Farmers Journal event in relation to the current state of the beef market, and that's what we're going to be speaking about in just a moment. Also, most of you received a letter from the department this week stating the new TB rules are about to come into effect. Obviously, these were brought in, or published, I should say, last September, I think, for the ploughing. So it's a number of months on, but they are finally coming into play. Noel Barden from the Farmers Journal will give us more information on that a little bit later and how they will affect you. Obviously, going to be different if you're a dairy farmer, beef farmer, etc. But some new rules there that are going to come into play in the next fortnight. Teagasc also have published a dairy calf to beef manual with tips from sourcing calves all the way through to finishing them. Fergal Maguire is from the Dairy Beef 500 programme. He's going to join me later to give a rundown on that. It's available for free online. It's divided up into 8 steps and some really useful tidbits in that. Fergal is also selling some sheep this evening up in his neck of the woods, up in Carnaross. He has some lambs to sell, so we're going to get some news on the sheep market from Fergal later. Staying on sheep, the National Sheep Welfare Scheme, it opened today, and one of the measures is vaccination. Same as last year, it was clostridial last year, but blue tongue has been added to the list. Willie Shaw from the ICSA is going to give us more on that a little bit later. Finally this evening, Irish Rural Link. They're based in County Westmeath. They're the national network for rural community development, and they have a new CEO. He's a Westmeath man, Brian Leonard. He takes the reins and he's going to tell us later what Irish Rural Link does for you as farmers and indeed countryside dwellers. Now, as always, text me, WhatsApp me, 083 30 10 103 on what is a beautiful sunny evening here in Tullamore. But unfortunately, that is not the forecast for the next number of days. You may have heard the weather there before we came on air. Very unsettled with some weather warnings, and that is what it's going to be like coming right into next week. So unfortunately, it's just a little bit of sunshine this evening and back to unsettled weather then for the next number of days. Now, as I said at the outset, beef is what we are speaking about now. Joe Burke from Board Bia joins me. Joe, many thanks for taking my call this evening.
No bother at all, MJ. I'm glad to come on, and unfortunately it's been a bit unsettled on the beef market as well, as you have reflected there just in the introduction, that we've seen a significant fall-off, it has to be acknowledged, since the beginning of the year in terms of factory prices. So, yeah, that's disappointing. We had the meeting in Abbeyleix on Monday night, and there was a great turnout. A lot of farmers there. Obviously, a lot of frustration among farmers selling cattle into meat plants there over the last few weeks and months.
Yeah, well, you took the words right out of my mouth, Joe, because my opening line to you was I prefer to be speaking to you with better news. But the drop is what we're talking about. I suppose the question, Joe, on farmers' lips is, and I'm speaking to farmers every day pretty much, and they're just wondering why. Why is this occurring? What is the reason for such a drop, such a significant drop in such a short space of time in comparison to, well, obviously, look, last year was the one who was the golden chalice in relation to beef prices. But even, 2 months ago, we were still in good stead. And then suddenly it's been a rapid drop over the last 6 weeks. And people are wondering why. Is there a simple answer for them, Joe?
Yeah, like a lot of things, I suppose a good few different contributing factors, MJ. Like one would have to be, I suppose, the fact that last year we saw cattle prices increase by nearly 40%. To an average of the equivalent of more than $7.50 a kilo on average, like for the year, all things included. So that increase, I suppose, gradually was passed on to the end consumer, not just here in Ireland, but around our key markets, the UK and around Europe. And that, where you had higher prices, that led to some impact on the demand, on the consumption also. So, to take, for example, in the UK, most recently, there was a decline there of about 8.5% in the volume of beef being purchased at supermarket level. So 8.5%, it's fairly significant. On average, prices at retail level up by about 20% kind of year on year or thereabouts. So, that would definitely be one of the factors, that price inflation leading to, I suppose, sensitivity and resistance within the markets at a consumer level. And we haven't had any additional cattle, MJ. It's worth saying, that actually for the year to date, the slaughterings are down by about 60,000 cattle. So that's, even back on last year's level. Last year we saw about 200,000 less cattle slaughtered. So it is very much down to, I suppose, what's happening at the market, what's happening at the demand level. But I suppose it has to be acknowledged, MJ, that it's not just that, all prices are back and that other markets are back to the same extent that we are. I suppose as a major exporter, we have been more impacted than others. Like the UK cattle price is probably back about 25 pence a kilo sterling since the beginning of the year. Around Europe, prices are a lot more stable. They're probably only back by about, 12 to 15 cents a kilo, as opposed to us, we're back nearly 50 cents a kilo, MJ. So that is significant. We have this thing called an export benchmark price, which is kind of the theoretical price that our Irish farmers would be getting if they were getting the kind of net price that is prevailing around our key export markets. So it's a kind of an index price, if you like. And we've fallen nearly 50 cents a kilo behind that as well. So all of those factors are certainly frustrating from an Irish beef finisher's perspective.
Are the UK, Joe, not as anxious for beef at the moment? Is that a part of it? Our big market over in the UK, or they're getting their beef, reading before, they're getting more beef now from abroad as a result of Brexit, and it's kind of hitting home now. It's starting to bite us. Is that a factor?
Yeah, it's still a really important market for us, MJ. It's still accounted for nearly half of the beef that we exported in 2025. And I suppose the export figures that we have to date for 2026, we just have, the CSO data for January, and that would still show that our exports in there are still very strong, still nearly half of our beef volume exports. I suppose we're highly reliant on the supermarkets there. They're, a key outlet for us, probably accounting for nearly half of the beef that we put in there. And they're, to a great extent, they're loyal customers. They are taking big volumes. They're taking a good spread of cuts from across the carcass, especially the forequarter, the mince, and so on. But it's at food service level, I would suggest that a lot of the damage is in terms of those imports from other producers, from Southern Hemisphere producers, the likes of Australia, New Zealand, and South America as well, that our share of the UK beef imports, that every year the UK imports about 350,000 tonnes of beef, and even in fact last year that their overall imports grew, but our share of the imports declined, and in fact they fell fairly significantly. We had been used to having a market share, for example, in previous years of about 77% of their overall imports, and that fell to 67% last year, MJ, as a result of that growth from non-EU suppliers. So that was mainly at food service, be it product going into catering, going into, some restaurants, and so on. So that's really where they're most price sensitive. They want to buy a low priced product. Maybe the quality assurance and the provenance and so on isn't as important to them. But still the fact that product is so cheap and it's coming in there, that has had an impact on our market returns as well.
We're talking about finishers, Joe, and obviously people losing money, losing a lot of money now on cattle which they bought a number of months ago. But look, as bad as it is to lose money, it's farmers at the moment are really struggling to get cattle killed, and being told, we'll take 4 a week for the next number of weeks, 6 a week. Maybe someone might have 60, 70 cattle get killed. This is what I'm hearing from across the board, and this is a very, I suppose, a big stressor for farmers at the moment. Not only are they losing money on it, they're also having to stay feeding cattle while they're fit to kill, and they're wondering, is there any light at the end of the tunnel, or in maybe 2-3 weeks time do we see a bit of a lift, more demand? It's what hopefully is going to occur, but they are really in the dark at the moment, is what I'd say, Joe.
Yeah, that's the fact that the weekly kill has only been 31,000. I suppose for last week it increased slightly, 32,000, but like that's still back 4,000 cattle a week on the levels of this time last year. And in spite of that really, low throughput, there's still a difficulty in getting cattle in. There's a backlog there of a couple of weeks, and that has been the case there for the last couple of months. And farmers will know that they're not in a very strong negotiating platform whenever they ring up and they're being told, look, with loads of cattle, it's going to be a couple of weeks, we'll fit you in. And as you suggested there as well, MJ, they're being told, no, we won't take them all off you, we'll take them in dribs and drabs. I think that, and just based on, I suppose, the feedback over recent days, that situation is alleviating somewhat. That's not that much of a consolation for, farmers that have experienced that over recent weeks. But I think, we have eaten into that backlog a bit over recent weeks. I think that you're likely, obviously, over the next couple of weeks anyway, to see farmers kind of focus on, okay, we've processed most of the animals that we had earmarked for selling out of the shed, focusing more on, letting cattle to grass. There won't be in any major hurry then to start selling, animals off grass, obviously, for a good while. But I think especially if weather picks up, hopefully that will also stimulate a bit more demand. Certainly at the higher priced steak cuts, there has been difficulty there in moving, be it strip loins and ribeyes. And I think if weather improved a bit around Europe, and their barbecuing season usually kicks off a lot earlier than ours, that should hopefully have a beneficial effect. But yeah, I would say over the next couple of weeks, MJ, that cattle will start to move a bit more and a bit at factory level, that exists should and hopefully clear out altogether.
Our medium-term view, I suppose, Joe, we're 1 April there now at the moment. If we're talking about maybe the next 2 to 3 months, do we see any differential in prices, any price increase? What would the word from the industry be?
Yeah, look, I'd be optimistic, MJ, that we're near the bottom, or certainly would hope that we're at the bottom. Quotes to farmers there this week, like 660, 670 for heifers. I know it's disappointing in comparison to where we were, but I think that it will level off at that. And I would think that over the coming weeks then, that as cattle start to tighten up and hopefully market conditions improve, particularly around those steak cuts, that we would start to see a bit of an improvement on that as we go through, to the end of April, start of May. Cattle numbers will start to tighten up. And again, as I touched on there, I'd be optimistic that market conditions would recover a bit. So we'd hopefully get back, kind of north of €7 anyway. Going into the kind of late spring, albeit that's still loss-making territory for most of your finishers. Anyone who certainly bought cattle in the autumn, it wouldn't be, anywhere near break even for them, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, if it's any increase on what we have at the moment, Joe, it will be welcomed. Look, I'll say many thanks for joining me this evening, Joe, giving us a rundown there on what's happening in the global beef trade. And yeah, look, sure, hopefully the next time I'm talking to you, Joe, we're in a more positive place. And thanks for speaking to me this evening.
No bother, you're very welcome, and talk to you soon, MJ.
Joe Burke there from Board Bia. And I suppose the only word at the beef trade at the moment is it's very disillusioning, really. And you couldn't but scratch your head a little bit at those prices at the moment. And for people who did buy at the back end of the year and who were finishing, I'm very sorry for people who did that, because at the time that's the price cattle were, and if that was your system, what were you going to do if you had sheds that needed to be filled up, and if you had silage to be used, and if that's the normal system you're in, you had to do it from a tax perspective as well. And now you're in a loss-making position with a view to having to try and go back and buy stock thereafter. So very, very tough position. And hopefully, as Joe said, we are at the bottom of this, and hopefully we're going to move forward. Coming up after the break, I'm going to be speaking about TB. Noel Barden from the Farmers Journal is going to be telling us about the changes which are occurring in the next couple of weeks. You would have got a letter in relation to this in the post. So now, how is it going to affect you? We'll hear more in a moment.
Country Life on Midlands 103.
With W.R. Shaw, family owned and serving the Midlands since 1982, we're Ireland's largest independent agri-dealer, specialising in New Holland tractors and parts. With over 40 years' experience, we provide top quality sales, service and support. Visit W.R. Shaw in Tullamore and Carlow or online at wrshaw.ie.
And you're very welcome back to Country Life here in Midlands 103. Now, TB is what we're talking about for the next few minutes. We have Westmeath man Noel Barden from the Irish Farmers Journal on the line. Noel, many thanks for taking my call this evening.
Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome, Noel. So these changes, they're finally occurring. 13th of April, they're coming into play. Now, we've been familiar with them or aware of them, I think, since last September. Was it the ploughing that they were announced, Noel? They're after taking quite a while to come into force.
It was just before the ploughing they were announced, and even there would have been discussions around them, even going back to this time last year. It was something definitely that was in the works. But I suppose there's letters they're either on their way out to farmers, or a lot of farmers listening in might have got them already, that are just informing them that it is just in 2 weeks' time that they will kick in.
Yeah, so let's look at the different cohorts of farmers and how it's going to affect them. Obviously, the biggest cohort is that of dairy farmers. There's a number of different avenues now dairy farmers are going to have to go down in relation to testing. But if we could have a view of what they're going to have to do going forward, please, Noel.
Yeah, no, there is a lot there. So it is important that farmers, all farmers now, if they have cattle, check out the different testing requirements, because there's so many different changes there. It's not just easy to say that testing has to occur so often, or it's this type of testing, or it's this sort of movement. But I suppose to give a general sort of an overview of the changes that are coming in on the 13th of April, there's three kind of broad areas. The first one will be pre-movement testing. So farmers might have been kind of post-movement testing since that came in a couple of years ago, and that would be regarding animals that are over 36 months of age. But now that post-movement test is no longer allowed. The test has to be done before the animals are moved. And as far as I know, it's 30 days that pre-movement test is valid for. And I suppose if we're talking about what sorts of animals need those pre-movement tests, it's those that are over 3 years, as I said. Then there's all dairy cows who are moving into a breeding herd. So if someone's going out and to sell maybe some freshly calved heifers or cows that have calved down, they will need to be tested before they leave the farm to go to another herd or go to the mart. I suppose as well as that, there's a couple of changes there around contract rearing. So contract reared heifers that are being moved back to the farm that they're to be milked on, say if a farmer is to take back in their own heifers after they are reared, they'll need a pre-movement test, and again that's 30 days. And as well as that, any calves over 42 days or heifers that are over 42 days, where they're going to a contract rearer, they'll have to be tested. But that's only if your contract rearer is doing a couple of farmers' calves. So if you're going to someone that's only rearing your calves or heifers, that test isn't needed. So again, there's a lot of different groups that farmers are broken up into there when you look at the pre-movement tests. And I suppose it doesn't get any simpler, really, if we're to look at the other two broad areas where there's changes. So the first one will be changes to animal movements, and this will be cows that were part of an exposed cohort of animals will need to be blood tested if the herd breaks down again, and there's more than 3 animals that break down then.
I don't blame you, Noel, for getting a little bit tongue-tied on these now. No, expecting you to know them all. Like, it's really challenging to even follow it. Like, and you've only been speaking there for about 2 minutes, I'd say, and I'm trying to make notes as you're going, and I'm just saying to myself, good God, how's the average farmer meant to keep on track of all this? I know it will become clearer as we go on, but at the outset, it's a real shock to the senses.
It is, yeah, and I kind of caught up on where I was there. Yeah, no, so there's changes there as to whether or not the herd is 80 cows or less. So 80 cows is kind of a tipping point there. And as well as that, it depends on the size of the breakdowns, whether or not there's 5% of the cows that go down. So it is really important that farmers dig out those letters when they come, and it is definitely something that will have to be kept and referred back to. It's not the kind of thing farmers will be able to read once and say, okay, this is applicable to me, this isn't. It is really complicating the whole TV control area, and even the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association were out fairly hot off the mark, and what they had to say about it today was that if there are any sort of teething issues on farmers' side of it in terms of abiding by these rules, if the farmer didn't deliberately do them just for the first kind of lead-in period, they can't really be blamed, because there's a lot there, and the lead-in period in terms of sending this communication out to farmers, it's only 2 weeks before they kick in. So, whether or not farmers, vets, marts, everyone along the way will be able to kick right into gear on the 13th of April, I don't know. But definitely there is a bit of frustration there from farming organisations on the way that it has happened, especially, as we said, when it was agreed way back in September. There could have been different information packs sent out since.
I can imagine the phones hopping now in vets' receptions, I should say, across the country, wondering what the story is with their test from the 13th on, and a lot of people scratching their heads because, as you say, very hard to collate all this data. Noel, really, is there a department? Is there a hotline? Is there anyone you can ring? Is anyone farmers can ring in relation to it in the department to get clarity on it, or no?
There should be different hotlines there. It is something that comes up time and time again whenever, I suppose, the department officials are in front of Oireachtas committees or farmer meetings or whatever. It's something that you hear time and time again, is farmers saying how frustrating it is when maybe a letter arrives in the post telling them there's some sort of restriction and they might not fully understand it or know why exactly they're being restricted, or even what it means for them. But there are different phone numbers there on the department's website. And as well as this would be something that farm organisations, if farmers are a member of any of them, that they do a lot of work on as well, in terms of giving advice, in terms of signposting people to the correct place.
I'm noticing here on one of the, obviously look, there's loads and loads of new rules on it, but the contract reared heifers are going to need a 30-day pre-movement test before returning to their herd of origin. That's one that's going to, if they are to go down and the contract rearer has, a number of different animals from different herds, and he or she is only set up for maybe a grass-based system and not set up for the winter or whatever the case may be, that could really cause a lot of issues, that one.
Yeah, it is something that farmers would mention now whenever they're talking about considering contract rearing. And as far as I know now, farmers should look this up if they are in any kind of a situation like this. But as far as I know, you could take in those heifers if had to be done, but then you'd be restricting your own herd, and you'd be well kind of locked up at that stage. But absolutely, I think this will kind of spark a couple of farmers who might be sending calves to contract rearers to ask a couple more questions as to kind of how many more cattle are on the farm. If there are other cattle on the farm, are they the farmer's own cattle or are they more cattle that's been brought in? But it's definitely, it's something that always comes up as a solution, be it to nitrates or labour challenges or land availability challenges. But this is just another sort of layer there that has to be, another hoop that has to be jumped through for farmers who are considering that, or for the farmers who are looking to go out and contract rear.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to be considered. Noel, we'll leave it there because we could stay talking about this all evening. We could go through every separate angle of it. But look, I'm sure it will become a little bit more clearer as the weeks progress. No doubt you're going to be setting it out in great detail in the Farmers Journal over the coming weeks, and we'll read your articles and we'll try and get a clearer picture on it. But as you said, kind of each individual farmer to look at their own enterprise and to see what rules apply to them, and hopefully it'll become clear in the next weeks and months and days.
Yeah, absolutely. And those information packs, if they haven't arrived yet, they will arrive. So I'd say they'll be a vital resource going ahead. And as well as that, there is further information there on the Department of Agriculture's website.
Very good. Many thanks for joining me this evening, Noel.
Thank you.
Noel Barden there from the Farmers Journal, and lots for you to digest there. Noel knows that area upside down and inside out, and even he, when he's going through it, is wondering about some aspects of it. So for the average farmer who's just looking at it fresh, it is a challenging one. So look, your vet is going to be someone to speak to. Pick up the phone to ring the department. There's another individual to speak to, and if you're a member of the farm organisations, again, they'll have more information on it. And if you're tech savvy, you can do a bit of Googling on it. But if you're not, you're relying on that piece of literature then that comes out in the post. But I suppose what I would say to you is, if you are getting worked up about this or stressed about it, or you don't know what to do, you will be, pretty much told what to do when your test comes up, and then you're going. We will all become more familiar with it as it progresses. But more red tape and more hoops to jump through. I think that's the final summation on it. Now, coming up after the break, Dairy Beef 500, the Teagasc programme that brought out a manual on dairy beef calves, everything from sourcing them all the way through to finishing them. It's available online. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And also the National Sheep Welfare Scheme launched today. Willie Shaw from the ICSA is going to have a word on that for us. Stay tuned.
Country Life on Midlands 103.
Brought to you by W.R. Shaw, where New Holland isn't just a brand, it's our passion. For over 40 years, we've been Ireland's trusted name for New Holland tractors, parts and farm machinery. Whether you need new, used or ex-hire tractors, we've got you covered. wrshaw.ie.
And you're very welcome back to Country Life here on Midlands 103. Now, we're going to be talking about the Teagasc Dairy Beef 500 calf manual in a moment. But in advance of that, Willie Shaw from the ICSA is on with us in relation to the Sheep Welfare Scheme, which was launched today by the Minister. It's worth 22 million. Willie, we see that the big one, I suppose, Blue Tongue's involved in this. Good news?
Well, it's good news that he's involved in it, but bad news that we've to choose between two vaccines. Like he's saying that we can opt for the Heptavac or whatever one you're using, or the Blue Tongue, and like there's a substantial price difference in the two of those vaccines. Like,
yeah, and I suppose as with everything, Willie, comes down to the price. So the payments that you're receiving in the scheme versus the vaccine. If you go to Blue Tongue, do the numbers stack up?
No, it doesn't. No, we, in good faith as sheep farmers, entered into the scheme this time last year. We Heptavac or yours or whichever vaccine you were using, and we got stiffed. Then they told us there wasn't enough money, and they only gave us €11.50 per euro instead of €13 per euro. It doesn't sound a whole lot, but if you've got a good few euros, it mounts into money. Yeah,
and the same thing occurred with the dairy beef scheme as well. There was a lesser payment on it. So I suppose it's all well and good seeing this 13 per euro now. The Blue Tongue vaccine, look, the one thing we've been hearing about it is the cost of it. Per sheep, what are we talking about per head, Willie, for the vaccine?
Working out, well, it varies. It depends on what you're pricing it, from €3.50 to €5 per sheep.
Mm. Yeah, so there's not.
So like it's substantial. Like most lads aren't going to. I imagine we're looking at yet again. There'll have to be a crisis before we get anything from the department on this one, because it's too expensive for sheep farming. That's too expensive.
Well, it's a big number, and when you're not guaranteed your 13, as you quite rightly said, last year it got taken from you, sheep farmers, and you're not guaranteed it again. Nobody can say you're definitively going to get it. It's going to be down to each farmer to make the decision on it. I suppose, look, it is early days. It's only the opening of it today, the 22 million National Sheep Welfare Scheme. So down to the farmer to make a decision on it. Before I let you go, Willie, just a word on sheep prices. Look, for people selling lamb at the moment, very, very costly to have them ready for the Easter market on the 1st of April weekend. But prices good.
Prices are very good, MJ, but it's only where they have to be. They have to be there to keep the store buyer in the autumn coming back to the ring. The stores were a very good trade last autumn, so they have to make money, or no one will work for nothing anymore. That's what the Department of Agriculture keeps forgetting. But the EO numbers are dropping and going to drop again in the next couple of years. So this has to, you have to make a viable living now as sheep, or you're not going to do much work with them.
Very good. Willie, we'll be talking to you again as we progress on this. Thanks for the word on that, and we'll chat to you again on the programme. Willie Shaw there from the ICSA. So that's the news on the National Sheep Welfare Scheme. Blue Tongue has been included, however, at that price, 4,450 per EO, with the full payment of 13 at the moment. If that's what you are going to receive, ICSA feels that the margin's not there for that. Now, moving across to the Dairy Beef 500 scheme, and we have Fergal Maguire. But before we talk about calves, Fergal, we're going to talk about sheep. We're on the topic of sheep, and you were selling some lambs this evening up in your neck of the woods. How did you fare out?
Yeah, no, they just haven't gone through yet. But looking at lamb prices there, your spring lamb, your 42, 43 kilo spring lamb, that's coming in. They're coming in today. What I've seen going through in there, they're coming in around 210. Your 50 kilo hogget is coming in around 200. Anywhere from 196 to 205 or something like that there. So, yeah, the prices are decent. I wouldn't say they're brilliant, but.
And you're in. You're selling in Carnaross. Are you up in the mark this evening, Fergal? Or are you online?
So say that again. Then,
I said you're selling a few lambs. You were selling them in Carnaross there this evening. Are you Are you there in person, or are you online?
No. I just dropped them off and I came back home.
You came back. You're sitting at the kitchen table. The way we all sell animals now. Fergal, just a word on you. You can have your iPad running in the background there, and if you need to keep an eye on the sale, by all means do. But the Dairy Beef 500. Look, we're all familiar with the scheme. It's the Teagasc scheme for rare and dairy calves, but on Monday of this week you launched your Dairy Beef 500 manual. A little bit about this, please. What's the background of it?
Yeah, so look, calf to beef, right, there's a lot of skills to be learned in the calf to beef. So if you go back a couple of years before calf prices went crazy, or before beef prices went crazy, the ICBF had a figure there. For every 10 lads that got into calf to beef, after 5 years, only 4 of them were left. So, look, there was lots of issues. The quality of the calf coming from dairy herd would have been seen as one. But a lot of beef farmers were saying that there wasn't any money in these calves. But look, what we were showing on any of our demo farms, and then any of the work that's been done on research, there actually was good levels of profit made on farms if you followed a system and hit the targets within that system. So, look, we had lads. Even before the beef price rose, we had lads doing between 12 and 1,500 euro net profit per hectare. So if you take a 40 or 100 acre farm, that was nearly 50,000 euro net profit before you start taking in your payments. So it was a good level of profitability. But still, there was the fact that there was a lot of lads getting into calf beef production and they was dropping out. And a lot of it is there's a lot of skills to be learned. So looking, sourcing the right calf, getting value for money. Getting that calf reared well, just getting them transitioned back. That's what is going to gain weight when he's out of grass. That first winter, not lads fall down, they don't hit the target weight gain that what they should be hitting. And then that following year, where there's a big variation in between summer. So we have some of our lads, they do a kilo a day of grass. So they'll be out for, if you take it there, the average farmer gets it the 1st of April. We'd like them to get it a bit earlier, but the average farmer gets it the 1st of April. If they're in the 1st of November, you can do a kilo a day with these type of cattle. Your animal will be going out of the shed around 300 kilos, and that next October he should be coming in at around 500 kilos, right? But if you go to any of the marts, whether it's Carnaross Mat or Eden Dairy or Tullamore, you will often see these dairy bred cattle, and they won't be near 500. It'll be 350, 360, 370 kilos. That's September, October, when they're 18, 19 months of age. And if you take the difference in a 200 day, if you're doing a kilo a day of grass versus if you're doing a half a kilo a day of grass, which a lot of beef farmers will be doing, that's 100 kilos lost. And at today's price of them type of cattle, you'll be talking 4 euro a kilo, you'll be talking 400 euro.
For your own members, look, obviously you and Teagasc can't be held responsible for low beef prices. That would be completely unfair to put it into your remit. But at the moment, say calf to beef to dairy 500, we're seeing very high calf prices. We're now seeing what is quite low beef finishing prices. So, say for your own members, the guys who are in your dairy calf to beef 500, are they worried now about buying calves at these higher prices at the moment this year, 2026, with a view to trying to finish them in the next, be it 24 months, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, so look, we have a figure there, right? To get a calf at 3 weeks of age, so he'll be around 50 kilos. And by the time you get him up in a lorry when he's 23 months of age, take an Angus bull up. By the time you get him up in a lorry at 23 months of age, that land will cost you around €1,400 in cost. Right? And if you're paying, you can do the figure up very quickly. Them cattle generally killing around 300 kilo carcass average, right? At 23 months of age. And that's doing all things good, right? So if you take it at beef price at, say, €7 a kilo, them animals are coming into 2,100. So you put your €1,400 and then you put your calf price, whether it's 400, 500, 600, 700, 800. And that'll tell you very quickly when, look, calf prices were very high and they probably were higher. If lads under sums, they probably should be paying the sort of money that was given for calves earlier on. And looking at what in the last week or 10 days, calf prices have come back significantly. So I've seen calf prices look, I was just looking at the market there yesterday or Monday, and I would say a typical 50 kilo calf was probably back under the head. So he's coming back at around €300. That's what I was saying in there. The standard calf is coming around 300, €350.
No,
so that's more realistic.
I would agree with you, Fergal. I've seen quite a drop in the last, be it 2 weeks. I know the Farmers Journal, they keep an eye on abandoned mart. They often have pictures up, and I saw they had pictures of my own mart Burr in Offaly here last week, and I did see far more salient prices, if you will, for the likes of those black calves coming back down into that kind of territory. But as you say, that's where they need to be if the individual who's going to put in a very hard 22 months or 23 months now, let's not forget the person who's going to go on and bring that calf through to finish. That's a lot of work, especially if you're doing a big bundle of those calves. So a margin has to be made.
Yeah, and look, that's where the Dairy Beef 500 program comes in. So if you're trying to get lads is going into, so there's a lot to learn. So if you go in and there's a lot of lads bought calves that have probably never bought calves before because store prices were too high or they thought they were too high. But with a calf needs to be mowed and he needs to be gaining weight every day that he's on farm. So the farm needs to be nearly needs to be run like a dairy farm in terms of grass and management. You have to be moving them cattle on every 2 to 3 days. You need to be going into the right covers. You need to be going enough grass for the stocking rate you have, but you don't want to be going too much grass either. So you need to get that. You know what I mean? You don't want to be in the month of May going into big heavy covers because you have oceans of grass. So you need to figure that out. You have even as simple as finishing. So what is the finishing diet of these cattle? Some lads, these cattle, especially your Angus and your Herefords, they'll go over fattening very quickly. Well, lads given 7-8 kilos a meal, and what ends up happening is they're not like your Continentals where they're really good converters of concentrates. Your dairy bred cattle, if you think about it, the cows were bred for grass. If you have an Angus or Hereford, they're bred for grass. Where you really get your maximum efficiency is when them cattle are grass, and that's your second year grass. You just have to make sure that the right grass is going into the animals.
As you said, I'm just out of time, but as you said, there is so much to learn on it for a novice going into it.
We run courses, but the manual is ahead, so it's 8 sections in the manual, so it goes all the way through the lifetime of the animals. So the first chapter is picking the systems that you need to. The first section is picking the right system for your farm. So some farmers will focus on the heifer system, the bullock system. You have all the different targets that you need to be hitting, and then what you end up having is the next section will be sourcing your calves. Following on that is keeping your calves healthy. Then the rearing of your calves in terms of milk replacer, getting them onto meal, that sort of thing. Then the next section is your first summer grass. After that, it's your first winter. Just going through the whole, like how did you get as much weight in it during these times as possible? And then the next one is your second summer grass, and your final section would be your finishing section.
And hopefully section 9 then is the profit you make on them, Fergal. That's what we're looking for. I'm just gonna have to leave it there, Fergal. I'm just out of time, but we'll talk to you again on the programme. Thanks for the rundown, and the manual is available in Teagasc offices throughout the country. Thanks, Fergal.
Yeah, no bother, MJ. Thanks for that.
Fergal Maguire there from the Chagas. Dairy beef 500. Look, I could talk to Fergal all evening, but unfortunately just out of time. The main thing Fergal said there is on prices. So if you're buying calves today or last week or this week or next week, 1,400 to rear your Angus calf at a beef price of €7, which we're not at the moment, but if we are in 2 years' time, fingers crossed, that animal's coming in at 2,100, 1,400 to rear. So the difference between 14 and 21 is €700. So however much you pay for your calf, take it off to 700 at today's figures, and that's what your profit's going to be. So if you pay 4, you might make 3. If you pay 5, you'll pay 2. If you're paid anything north of €550, €600 for Angus calves, all you're going to really be doing is turning money to make other people profit. You're not going to be making much yourself. So that's the figure to bear in mind. Now, coming up after the break, CEO of Irish Rural Link, Breen Smith, he's just appointed. We're going to hear from him. Stay tuned.
Country Life on Midlands 103.
With W.R. Shaw. Looking for the best in farm machinery? We've been supplying top quality New Holland tractors and parts and providing service since 1982. Our expert team is here to keep your farm running smoothly with branches in Tullamore and Carlow. Visit wrshaw.ie today.
And you're welcome back to Country Life here in Midlands 103. I'm going to shoot really quickly here to our last segment this evening because we're just running short on time. Breen Smith has just been appointed as the new CEO of Irish Rural Link, all the way from County Westmeath. Breen, congratulations on the appointment and welcome to the programme. I'll be speaking to you over the course of your tenure, as I did with your predecessor. You must be delighted with the role.
And I can't express how delighted I am and how honoured I am to be asked to take up the CEO of Irish Rural Link. It's such an honour, and as you pointed out, my predecessor Seamus Boland is a legend in the Irish rural community, and certainly I've huge shoes to fill in his absence.
The Irish Rural Link, Breen, for people who may not be familiar, if you're a farmer or indeed a countryside dweller, how does it work on your behalf?
The Irish Rural Link represents 600 organisations. We have 25,000 members countrywide. We have a number of European and Irish-based projects that we run. Notably, from the farmer's perspective, it would be the Breeding Waders project, which is in conjunction with the National Parks and Wildlife Service and DAFM, particularly where we will be looking to pay farmers to manage their habitats and wetlands, and in relation to birds like the curlew, the dunlin, and various other environmental measures. So we have €5,000 that will be per farm potentially that we will be putting out there for farmers in the rural area. On top of that, we've just come off the back of the Farm Peat project, which was focused on the peat soils and all the troubles that we have around them. And in the general rural population, we look after things like the Meals on Wheels. And of course, we've got our advocacy elements, which we advocate there for the protection of services in the rural area and ensuring that we all have sufficient services such as transport, banks, post offices, etc., to live and have a good lifestyle in rural Ireland.
So important, Breen, to have somebody to fight on the behalf of rural dwellers, especially older people who may be in isolated areas and who need access to, as you say, Meals on Wheels, or be it bus services, wherever the case may be, because some people do feel that the countryside dweller does get left behind in comparison with the urban dweller.
And we often hear that term rural proofing, which, being honest about it, I still have to see how it works in real life. We have to have a good, strong advocacy voice there to make sure that the people you've identified, and indeed the most vulnerable in society, in the rural communities, are protected and that they are heard. And that's what I want to focus on in my tenure, is that I want to hear and make sure that the unseen and the unheard voices get put out there, and that we do have a good advocacy mechanism, that we can get their message across and ensure that the services that they require are out there and available to them if and when they need them.
Absolutely, and great to hear. Breen, we'll be speaking to you during your tenure. We just wanted to say hello this evening. Congratulations on the role, and keep fighting the fight for the countryside dweller, and we'll speak to you here again on Country Life.
MJ, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Breen Smith there, the new CEO of Irish Rural Link. And as I said, we'll be speaking to Breen here on the programme during the course of his tenure. That is it for this evening's programme. busy hour as always. We started off back at 7 p.m. with Joe Burke from Board Bia with the unfortunate update on beef prices, not where anybody wants them to be. 660, 670 at the moment is what we're looking at, and it is very, very poor. And as I said, just very disillusioning really over the course of the last few weeks as we see beef prices plummet. Hopefully we're at the bottom, and hopefully it is on an upward trajectory going forward. After Joe, we spoke to Noel Barden from the Farmers Journal, who had the news on TB. So on the 13th of April, TB rules are changing, and there is a myriad of new rules that are quite difficult to follow. So if you are wondering how they affect you, to consult the Department of Agriculture, or indeed your vet, or indeed if you're a member of a farming organisation, to give them a call as well to see what way it's going to happen. There's all pre-movement, post-movement rules depending on ages, percentages, whatnot. Really, really a lot of detail there. So we'll be mulling through it over the coming weeks and months here on the programme. Also, Fergal Maguire, Dairy Beef 500. There's a manual now if you're rearing dairy calves. You can pick it up in your Teagasc branch, and just to be conscious of how much you're spending on your calf to see if you can have a margin at the end of it all. Willie Shaw from the ICSA spoke to us about how blue tongue is now part of the National Sheep Welfare Scheme, the blue tongue vaccination. But they're calling for more money because there's not enough to pay for it with the current scheme of €13. And lastly there, Brian Smith from Irish Rural Link. I'll be back with you next Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. I'll be repeated on Sunday morning at 7 a.m. as always, and we'll speak to you in 7 days' time.